Hey everyone, this is Kevin from thechesswebsite.com, and today started one of the biggest tournaments of the year. It's the Sinquefield Cup, the 4th annual, held in St. Louis, Missouri, with 10 of the top players in the world. It is the third tournament in the leg of the 2016 Grand Chess Tour, so very, very prestigious tournament. Now, the leader of the Grand Chess Tour, Magnus Carlsen, is not participating. He's getting ready for the World Championships later in November. Well, we still have 10 of the top players in the Grand Chess Tour. Today's match, we're going to actually be seeing number 2 versus number 3. They're tied, so this tournament means a lot to them. And it's actually 2 Americans, so playing on U.S. soil in St. Louis, Missouri. We have Wesley going to be playing the white pieces in round 1. His opponent playing the black pieces is going to be Nakamura. So starts out with pawn to d4, knight f6, pawn c4, pawn e6, knight f3, and after pawn to d5, we get into the Catalan opening with pawn to g3. It's an opening we don't see all too often, but is always interesting to see at the highest level. It's a kind of a combo between the Queen's Gambit and also the ready opening. Black has 2 options. He could not take this material on c4. That would be the closed variation, or he could always take this material for the open line and then try to either hold on to that material or just give that material back and then try to progress and attack on the queen side of the board. We'll continue. Bishop here, e7, bishop g2, castle on the king side, and then Nakamura decides to go ahead and take here on c4. From here, white's going to continue with knight to e5. This does a few things. One, it immediately strikes back to go ahead and get this material back on c4. It also opens up the door for this light square bishop to really control this long diagonal. Sometimes black would try to hold on to that material with pawn to b5, but you can see right away that's not going to work since the bishop is controlling. You can just go ahead and take that rook here on a8. So instead, continues with knight to c6, opting to go ahead and give back this material. If So wants to go ahead and take this, So decides not to. He decides to go ahead and take with his knight here, and then after the pawn recaptures, knight here to a3. Very interesting. I think it would have been slightly easier. I don't know if better is the right term, but a little bit easier just to take with the bishop here. The pawn could recapture. And then after the knight takes here, we could see the queen to d7, knight up here, e7, queen takes, queen up here, a5. I think this looks really good. Can get this material back if he wants to. Has a nice structure with his pawns. He's going to have an isolated pawn here on the c file for Nakamura. So all in all, I think this is a really good play for So. He decided instead to go and take with his knight after the pawn takes, knight here to a3. And this is a pretty questionable move, if you ask me. I think it makes a lot of sense just to take with the bishop on c6. He decides, one, to go ahead and leave his opponent with a triple pawns here on the c file. They are all isolated, which I do like that because you can attack this later on. But knight to a3 is just kind of weird. He could easily get this evolved into the center of the game, really use that to control, but instead he decides to go and give himself doubled pawns here on the a file. So just really did not want his opponent to have a dark square bishop, instead giving himself double pawns on a2 and a3. Seems a little bit odd to me, but that's what So decided he wanted to go ahead and play. Bishop here, a6, queen d2, rook here, b8, controlling this long open file. Queen up here to a5. So starting to put a little pressure. There's a lot going on the queen side of the board. King side, both sides are pretty safe here. Even in the center of the board, with some of those knights off the board, there's not much going on. So there's going to be a lot of action going on this side of the board for a while. Nakamura continues with queen to c8, protecting the bishop here on a6, and then pawn up here, a4, allowing for the bishop later on to come here to a3, a rook to d8, attacking the square here on d4, and then bishop to a3. Now, after the rook comes down, it looks a little surprising. So has given Nakamura a 2-pawn lead in the game, but he doesn't necessarily have that big of an advantage. Yes, he is up 2 pawns, but if we look at it from Nakamura's side, he has 3 pawns on the c file. They are all isolated. There are no pawns on the b or the d files to kind of protect them. So that's going to be hard for him to hold on to, but So on the other hand, he can always play bishop to c5. attacking the rook, also attacking the pawn here on a7. If there is any other sort of shenanigans, the bishop can always come here to c6, take that material. So although he is down material now, he does have some strong attacks a little bit later on the queen side that he can employ. So we see rook to b1. Could have also played rook to b1 as well from a1. He does have some options, but decides to go and play rook here to b1. Rook down here, b6. Could have been interesting. Just take down here, get some material off the board. Anytime you're up in material, if you can just exchange down to almost nothing, just your pawns, you could have a very strong endgame. But plays rook here, b6, and then bishop to c5, attacking both the rooks here on b6 and d4. Nakamura decides he wants to go and hang on to his d-file rook, and so we see rook to d1, h6. I'm not sure he should have played h6. I think that's really just getting away from kind of the action here on the queen side. His opponent decided not to take the rook right away, so if he's going to do that, I say go ahead and bring the rook down here to b2. Now you're not going to lose a rook. All of a sudden you're on your opponent's second rank, which is where you really want to be with your rooks. If you're black, if you're white, you want to be having your rooks on the 7th rank. This is just applying a lot of pressure. Pawn here on e2 is under pressure. The rook can't come away from a1. Also, he can start to add more pressure with this pawn pushing forward since he has some protection here with his rook a little bit later down on this second rank. But he decided to go ahead and play pawn to h6, and then there is an exchange on board. Rook takes here on d7. We see the knight take, and then the bishop takes here on b6. After the pawn recaptures, then the queen swings back here to d2. So if we kind of look at it, we have 6 pawns for white. We have a lot more, was 8 pawns for black, but we do see an exchange. Instead of a bishop and a knight, we do see the bishop and the rook for white. So getting into the endgame, if we can get these queens off the board, a bishop and rook endgame is going to be much more dangerous than a bishop and a knight endgame, just because the rook is so powerful. It can control so much of the board and really just put a lot of pressure, get behind enemy lines, and start to gobble up the pawn. So that's what both sides are going to be looking to do. Nakamura really wants to just hold on to his pawn advantage, really start to push in the center of the board. Maybe he can force his enemy to make a mistake. He can promote one of these pawns, and he can end up winning the game with that strategy. But right now, he is somewhat in a tough spot, knowing that So has the better endgame. We see pawn to c5 here from Nakamura, solidifying his pawn chain. If you kind of analyze this a little bit further, if you kind of watch some of the commentary from the match today live, they really like the move knight to c5. Yes, it doesn't solidify the pawn chain, but this pawn right here on c6, it is being protected by the queen on c8, so it does already have that protection. But the knight on c5 is just doing a lot more on board than the pawn to c5, which isn't doing too much on board. But in the game, we see pawn to c5, and then rook over here to d1, controlling this d-file, putting a lot of pressure on the knight here on d7. The knight comes over here to f6, getting out of harm's way, and then king over here to f1. Realizing this is kind of getting into the endgame, knowing that if the queen and rook start to push up the board, the king has to be aware that this pawn can start pushing down here to c1. So that's why you see that move here to f1. It's thinking many, many moves ahead, thinking about all the options of how Nakamura could actually win this game. Nakamura plays king to h7, just making sure that if there's a queen to d8, there's an exchange on board, there's not a tempo gained. So he decides to go ahead and play king to h7. First we see queen to c2, check. King back here to g8, king d2, king h7. So that is a twofold repetition. So has the option right here to go ahead and have a threefold repetition, have a draw for the first game. But he actually really likes his position, so he wants to go ahead and continue to play it out. So he changes it up a little bit, does not want to draw with the threefold repetition. If you're not familiar with the threefold repetition, if you have the same setup on the board and you move just back and forth for 3 moves, it will be a drawn game. So after queen to d8, we do see the queen take. take, rook takes here on d8, and then pawn to c3. So if you have a passed pawn, you need to push that passed pawn as fast as possible. So Nakamura knows his road to victory is going to be this pawn pushing forward. This rook here on d8 is going to be causing a lot of problems. Get behind enemy lines, he can start to gobble up pawns. All these pawns are ready to be taken. Also pretty much has to do is stop the push from Nakamura. Starts out with king to e1. That's why that move from f1 was so important, because he could not get back there fast enough with some of his other material. Bishop here to c4, just centralizing. King to d1. Bishop takes here on a2. Doesn't matter too much though. So although he's giving up material, he can get that material back if he wants to. He just needs to make sure he stops this push with the pawn here from c3. King up here to c2, getting ready to gobble that up. Bishop to c4. Pawn to e3. He recognized that he could take this pawn if he wanted to, but he does not want to give up any more pawns that he has to. And you'll see this a lot anytime your opponent has a specific bishop on board. So in this particular case, we see a light square bishop. You'll start to put all your pawns on the other square. So these are the dark squares. And now So doesn't have to worry about any of these pawns being a target for this light square bishop. Pawn here to b5. This is protecting the bishop and also attacking the pawn right here. King up here to c3. This also does keep the pawn on b5 at bay. It can't take the pawn here on a4 because just the bishop's going to fall right away. So can't do that. Pawn here to a6, just adding a little bit of protection on the pawn here on b5. Rook over here, a8, attacking the pawn as we talked about. Knight to d5, forcing the king to move, also allowing the pawn to come down here on b4 a little bit later. But we first see an exchange on board. The bishop takes here on d5. The bishop wasn't doing too much, and just getting down to an endgame with a rook versus bishop is going to be even better for So. So we see the pawn take here on d5, pawn to a5. Now all the pawns are on dark squares. That's exactly what So wants to be doing here. Pawn here to b4. King comes back here, d2. Bishop back, f1. Rook to c8, just adding pressure on this pawn. The pawn's going to come down here, c4. Rook over here, b8, kind of forcing the moves. After pawn to b3, we see king to c3. And from this position, Nakamura actually resigned. So ended up winning game one. There's no great way for Nakamura to continue in the endgame. The rook's just going to dominate all these pawns. Can play rook to b7, looking to gobble up the pawn here on f7. Can come over here to a8, gobble up material. Rook here to d8. All those are fine. Eventually this pawn's going to fall. There's a pass pawn. There's no way that this king can really control it. At the end of the day, it's going to be a long game. I'll be completely honest with you, but at the end of the day, Nakamura realizes he just can't win this, and So has the dominant endgame. So all in all, Nakamura ended up resigning. So wins game one. Huge victory for him. I really thought kind of the top two players, especially for the Grand Tour, coming in, they wouldn't really do anything too crazy. We'd play a pretty drawish game. But at the end of the day, So came out, played a very interesting variation of the Catalan opening, and at the end of the day, he gets the victory. So congratulations to him winning game one. Nakamura is going to be looking to battle back. Not the start that he was looking for at the Sinquefield Cup, but a lot of rounds left to go. So hopefully you guys are excited about this tournament. We're going to be doing videos every night that there is a round for the next week and a half. So expect a lot of videos from this tournament. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you in round two.